joining, everyone. We're just going to give 1 or 2 minutes here for any stragglers before we kick off today's discussion, the cybersecurity gap, real-world threats, limited resources, and smarter defenses. So looking forward to kicking us off. We should be running 30 to 45 minutes today with some time at the end for any questions. Awesome. I think we have given enough time just to get started in here. What I'll start off doing is just introducing Virtual Graffiti. Who's Virtual Graffiti and who's Sophos? So Virtual Graffiti, we're an IT provider, as you might be aware, providing 50 plus different unique cyber stores. Our Sophos branded cyber store is enterpriseav.com.au. Here you'll find up-to-date product information, product guides, sizing information, and have access to our dedicated specialists at any time, whether that's through phone call, email, chat, etc., to help you in your cyber security and network security journey. A little bit about our panel. We have 2 famous gentlemen here joining us from the Sophos team. I'll let Tony and Emmanuel introduce themselves. So Tony, Emmanuel, tell us a bit about yourselves and then a little bit about Sophos as well, and maybe your favorite colors.
I'll go first now, but it's a good question. Can I start with the color? It's
yes,
yellow.
Yeah, absolutely.
For some reason it's yellow, and I have no idea why. But yeah, let's move beyond that awkward moment. Look, I've been in the industry for, I would say, 30 years. It's been 1992 since probably I've touched the first computer ever. Of course, it looked very differently at the time. And, I never left. I've been in the IT, loved doing IT my whole life, mostly networking. So my background is networking, and eventually slowly moving into that security side of things. It wasn't called cybersecurity at the time. And maybe around 10 years back-ish, since I, landed in New Zealand, really focused on that security side of things. With everything that encompasses today cybersecurity, and we know it's quite a complex area. Hopefully, we'll try to debunk some of those things today. Otherwise, at Sophos, I'm a senior solution engineer. I'm pretty much across everything that Sophos does, and I do cover the whole ANZ space plus the Pacific Islands.
Fantastic. Aman, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I've been in the industry for 15 years, started as a virtual SE. So right now I love doing stuff in my lab, and what I love about security, it's always evolving. So the nitty-gritty stuff, then definitely every day that I encounter with my team, the issues, the new solutions. So yeah, we're always checking on it. And my favorite color is blue. I don't know why is it blue, but of course.
Sophos blue.
Oh really?
Sophos blue. I like it.
Yeah.
Most of the people on the call here will know who I am because I interact with them on a day-to-day basis. I'm Thad. I'm here at Virtual Graffiti. I helped grow Virtual Graffiti into what it is here today, and have helped a few startups get off the ground here in Asia Pac with their cybersecurity operations. Why I wanted to chat, I guess, with Sophos today, as I find Sophos is a great tool for those teams that have limited security resources in terms of people, headcount, and need to do more with that cybersecurity budget in here than some of the higher end tools that require large security teams to come in and help them out. So with that, let's start by jumping off into some threats and some of the real world risks in here. My favorite color, of course, Virtual Graffiti red, followed by Sophos blue. So there we go.
So what do you get when you combine red and blue? The 2 favorite colors of yours?
Oh, we got some purple. You know?
Threat intelligence, right in the middle. That's the colors of the threat intelligence. And you know, that's a good start for probably starting the session today. And I think just for everyone's attention today, we're trying to make this session as interactive as we can. None of these people and this actually session loves slides, so we'll try to make this very interactive, but hopefully that goes well. And you know, I think it's a good start. Everyone loves a bit of a ransomware stats, and interestingly enough, today, honestly, 2 hours ago, we just released the latest state of ransomware report. So there is a brand new version out.
This is already out of date, Tony. Is that what you're telling me? That we have a 2025
we already outdated with this to see how fast the cybersecurity changes. Now, look, putting the joke aside, Sophos releases quite a few reports on an annual basis. Some of them yearly basis, some of them maybe twice a year. And strongly encourage you to really look into this, because we run so much threat intelligence behind the scene. We have a very large threat intelligence team as part of the whole XOps ecosystem that's behind pretty much every single product and services we do. So strongly encourage everyone to look into these reports, and maybe we'll share the links with the attendees after this call as well. But look, to be honest, we know ransomware is still here. Yes, the numbers might be changing on a yearly basis. I don't think it means too much. At the end of the day, the idea is that ransomware, it's not what it's been once. So when we look at ransomware today, it's definitely a more advanced persisting threat than just a small piece of code that drops on your laptop or server or endpoints, whatever that is, and encrypts your file. So ransomware implies a very staged, organized attack to the point that it leads to a way of another to harm you. And we're going to look into those things as we move on with the slides.
I think too, this is number of reports in here as well, Tony, and not everyone reports when they have suffered a ransomware attack. So just because the reporting has gone down doesn't mean that more machines were not infected in here, right? Or the ransom was just paid and never talked about, sort of thing. I'd imagine if we looked at 2025, it's probably around the same in here. And there's some instances of ransomware, and hopefully detected by endpoint security products such as Sophos, and prevented, really. So I think there's a few factors going into that number right there.
Fair enough. And I'm keeping the latest report on my second screen just to throw some stats as we move on. But yeah, fair enough. And speaking on ransomware and ransomware gangs, as I said on the first slide, when we're looking at ransomware today, it's a very advanced persisting threat. They're very, very organized. We look at cybercrime as a service. We can even see a decentralization of those stages as part of an attack, initial access to obfuscation, to infiltration, to deploying malware, to exfiltration, and so on. So, but interestingly enough, we're still looking at maybe certain vectors that you would expect by now to be completely covered in the baseline security that every single customer and partner should be looking into, right? But we still see remote desktop connections or remote desktop servers being publicly exposed, not being protected by different type of technologies that we have today, like ZTNA, even an old school VPN. If nothing else, just put it behind a VPN and don't let it exposed out there. VPN credentials, but that really ties back to identity, and we're going to look into identity a bit more today. But that's I think if nothing else, start with a baseline security, apply, MFA should be part of that baseline, although it can be quite easily bypassed. But if, again, it's nothing else, it will buy you time to see certain indicator of compromise, eventually respond in time.
If you attended any of our other webinars in here, I think some of the users would see I talk a lot about passwordless authentication being the norm these days. Look, you're never going to remove all of your passwords at the end of the day. However, the more you can, the less likely you run into some of those MFA woes, so to speak, where it could be compromised, right? And you just eliminate that attack surface.
I think identity is the new oil. I've read it on a few blogs already. So definitely,
it's been that way for 10 years.
We're just making it official.
Yeah. At Canalys 2 years ago, Tony actually announced on stage that it was the year of identity in here for our team, and I think it's shown with some of the projects that we worked on here. Now let's talk about the risks, and they're different for the large companies versus the SMBs. Teams with that security experience. The SMB market, 0-day threats is number one, whereas for the larger enterprises, that's number 5 risk. Tony, why do you see that difference?
I think if you look at, again, just if we zoom back into our space here, the ANZ space, Australia, New Zealand, and of course Pacific Islands, we definitely we fit into the first category in most cases. I'm not saying we don't have proper enterprise accounts. Definitely we have a couple, or each one of us, each partner will deal with some larger customers, but most of the SMB and mid market will fit into that 1 to 500. I would say so, 100 to 500. And the risk is perceived differently depending on the vertical you're part of, what type of business you're running, and it really ties back to also your overall attack surface, right? Because if you maybe don't have anything publicly exposed, you're not fearing that much to 0-day threats. You're not fearing that much someone exploiting an unknown vulnerability. Although I can advise everyone that we see this type of behaviors even once after they get in. So 0 days does not only apply to what's publicly seen out there before actually initial access is achieved. So risk might change even depending on the stage of the attack. So and that's typically what we see. So we see a lot of creativity and a combination of most of these risks. And funny enough, I'm looking at the other screen where the latest report, and exploit vulnerabilities with compromised credentials still at the top of the highest risk in all categories.
I feel like that number 2, though, shortage of in-house cybersecurity skills or expertise, ties in with everything else. How are you going to respond to a 0-day in here, or insider threat, or a security tool misconfiguration, if you don't have that in-house skills or in-house expertise?
And I think, like, just to complement what you said a few slides ago on a different topic, that's old news, right? So we know we have a shortage in the industry, and it's not since 1 or 2 years ago. I could probably go back, like you said, 10 years back, and still have the same problem.
This was an issue when I was at one of my first cybersecurity companies. They talked about the skill shortage then. So I think it's always been an issue, but AI is slowly stepping up in here, as well as some other security tools. Is it there just yet? Probably not. But in the meantime, hey, look, it is getting better, but that those challenges have not left us at all.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the root cause of ransomware in here.
Now actually I'm matching.
Tony, let's jump into it. Yeah.
I'm matching all the new, and I can confirm that both the first 2 are still there. To be completely honest, they one-on-one with slight increase in each category. So
Okay.
exploit vulnerabilities, and that goes a long way. Again, goes from publicly exposed, when we look at the external attack surface management to internal attack surface management, it's either used as initial access or it could be used as lateral movement across your network. So exploiting that, trust me, we see this behavior once initial access is achieved. Our compromised credential, look, we're going back to identities, and I really feel that identity is the new oil. It really, oh, actually, we do have a saying. One of my colleagues, part of the GSE, the Global Solution Engineers, he said that hackers today don't break in, they log in. So, and that's basically on exfiltrated, compromised credentials. You can find them in any way, shape, and forms. And it's very hard to detect the breach if initial access relies on a legit login. So that makes it very challenging, and definitely that's the time you start putting more tripwires, so you see signs of changed behavior across the baseline, across your whole networks. Malicious email, I think that the second, third, and fourth really tie back into the story of identity. Some of them are just different vectors, right, to achieve that. Otherwise, it really ties back to identity theft.
I mean, it compromised Microsoft credentials, or single sign-on credentials are probably.
Microsoft can. So look, MFA on Microsoft, and it's not because of Microsoft. Or maybe I'm not going to comment and argue on that topic, but MFA on Microsoft can be easily bypassed. You deploy an Evil Jinx server. It's one of the type of malware that they use to effectively install an MFA token. They allow you to authenticate first. Once you get an MFA token, they stole that and they just log in, passwordless. If since you're such a big fan of passwordless, it works for the bad guys as well. They get the MFA token and that's it. They in.
That's why I still like physical tokens quite a bit in here. Because it's just that extra step harder.
Like the old school YubiKeys, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple tokens here for different services on my desk at all times, to authenticate into. So it still has its place to stop some of those compromised credentials, because you need that rolling authentication code.
But keep in your mind that eventually can generate a software-based token that effectively initiates a session-based token, and that's why they're stealing. So they're allowing you to use whatever means you want to authenticate with. And eventually, once you establish that connection, you have a session-based token, and that is not a physical thing. Yes, there are scenarios when this has to be plugged in and requires that to be plugged in for the whole session, but it's not that we do today. So it really goes back on effectively creating or deploying a really layered security that at some point you see signs and you respond.
But one of the interesting things in here is in the notes for us, Tony, it says that email-based approaches were the root cause of attacks in here. So before they got to exploited vulnerabilities, compromised credentials, a nasty email made its way through and compromised that user, whether it was from a link or malware or phishing. That was the root cause of some of the vulnerabilities of the compromised credentials.
Now, that's again really ties back to that identity, and part of that we see a lot of log stealers today that they do nothing else than sitting on the computer and continuously recording and exfiltrating logs, like authentication logs, and everything that really ties back to anything that can use eventually and log back in. But
So
speaking of painful points, I know you're really into this topic, so I'm going to let you go while on this one.
look, I mean, like the threats, are complex, and they're getting tougher to combat. We get phone calls in here every week where somebody's like, "Oh, I've been hit with, this version of ransomware or this. What do you recommend?" And it's just, hey, look, it's tough. Here are some tools that can probably help you out in solving it, but a lot of the times the org does not have the skill sets in here to address what's needed. So they really struggle to combat ransomware. They end up buying a new computer, or they pay the ransom. They might not have an IT staff in here, or they're just getting so much noise from their current security stack that they can't respond to threats. They're looking at login alerts that they shouldn't be looking at, sort of thing. So I think it's tough right now for a lot of orgs. How do you stop what I call shelfware from kind of taking over and over alarming you when you're 100 to 500 employees, or if you're 5 to 50 employees?
I think you've pointed out yesterday in our quick call we had that having to manage point of security solutions, and having to kind of recreate the whole story in your head, or whatever means you use, it makes it even harder to be across so many systems. Not to mention, depending on customer size and organization size, you might have teams, which could be just one person, to be honest, with dedicated for various parts of the security. So how do you tie that back into a single story? And when you respond, especially when you go to the operational root cause analysis and looking at the incidents, funny enough, in the latest report, 63 and 65% really ties back to that lack of security, lack of expertise, and in some cases even unknown. And that really ties back to who's really responding to this, and how can they really understand what happened and respond. And yes, you might have to, after the breach, to run a full root cause analysis and understand, and eventually try to see what you can improve, so you're not going through the same painful experience again. And sometimes you might be having to respond to an active breach live, and who's having that level of expertise to fight these guys and kick them out while they're still in. So definitely expertise is a big problem, and having all these complex systems across many solutions we manage, from firewalls to endpoints to email security to cloud to whatever they are, and tying that back into a single story, it definitely makes it very hard.
I like to compare it to just bringing it back to basics. Sometimes, you can have the Ferrari in the driveway here of security tools. However, if you don't know how to drive a manual, you're gonna really struggle in here. Hey, let's start off in mom's minivan, so to speak, before we jump into the Ferrari, so that we learn how to drive, and then slowly graduate our security program in here. And that's especially true if you have just one IT manager within the org who's also in charge of cyber security, or also in charge of compliance, or also in charge of these other security programs and initiatives that a company has.
Yeah, makes sense.
What's the threat though with ransomware, Tony? So we've talked about ransomware locking your computer, but we haven't talked about data theft in here at all. Why should people be just as worried about data theft as they are ransomware?
And this is really a topic I've liked. Actually, I did speak about this one at the CISO event last year in Auckland. And I actually increased the stake on this slide. It was a different slide, but it was talking about double extortion, encryption, and data theft or data exfiltration. And I said, you know what? I think there is a missing link here. There's a missing risk that maybe that SMB should be more considerate with alongside with these two. Because yes, you might have backups, or you might not even care some of your intellectual property has been exfiltrated. But we'll come back to that. But business disruption for a small business is equally harmful, if not even sometimes more harmful. How long can you be offline without your business, operate your business? How long does it take to recover? How long it takes for you to go back to your backups and put everything back online? And just because you've done that, have you eliminated the root cause? What if you know, and a couple of hours later, you've again compromised again? So again, let's come back to the slide. So double extortion, I would call this the triple dip, to be completely honest. And I will put everything in one bucket: encryption, data theft, and business disruption. And depending on each business, of course, one of these or more than one can be, in some cases, the final drop in the glass that sometimes it might even put the business completely out of the market. So in a lot of these cases, definitely we see that these two in combination, encryption and data exfiltration, they go hand in hand, and they're trying to, depending on what they manage to exfiltrate, you can say they're getting into negotiating with you and eventually say, you know what, I'm not going to pay you for the keys to recover my encrypted files. I've got backups. And then they falling into the second extortion technique, saying, okay, how about we make this data available on different, sites on the dark web, put it out there for sale. And I've seen cases where they said, we don't care. And they actually said, you know what, we're just going to make it available for free, just to be equally painful for you. And of course, last but not least, as I said, the business disruption. How long does it take for you to recover, and how can your business tolerate that? But altogether, think about this. In the SMB sector, where, and it's not exclusively, just for SMB, in a market where we slowly see, for the right reason, especially in ANZ, we see compliance and enforcing compliance and governance to be slowly getting their rightful places. Definitely is going to be harder to say, you know what, I don't care. Name reputation was going to be also very important for the business.
The hard part, I think, too, is it's like the mob, right? You might pay the extortion, and then they come back a week later and say, nah, I need a little bit more coin in here to really not release your data. And then you pay them a little more, and then they come back a fourth time and they say, hey, I need a little bit more money in here. This is pretty sensitive data. Yeah, and where do you draw the line of trusting, an attacker or a hacker in here with your sensitive data? You can't, sort of thing. Tony, we've missed a few questions in here. I'll let you handle Laura's. I'll read it out for you.
Yes, please.
Is SCIM more secure than individual randomized long passwords? If you don't know what SCIM is, it's Microsoft's using that sign-on with Microsoft passwordless authentication.
So the question is it more secure than using normal passwords?
Or long passwords, say
long
20-character passwords.
I'll
let you answer, and then I'll give my thoughts.
Yeah, no, look, it goes back to the baseline. Whatever authentication means you use, there is a minimum requirement in each case to apply. I would even call it common sense, but for non-technical people, and it's hard to understand what is considered long enough. So definitely that's where you go back to your IT department. You have to have a proper policy in place with a minimum length, complexity, and so on, plus a proper password policy. I wouldn't qualify any of these better than the other, because when it comes to an advanced adversary, a smart adversary that's trying to get in, they will manage to bypass either one. Slightly, I would say, Scheme is a bit more secure. Just to put a bit of a.
I think the thing is it reduces, human error in here. It gives IT that centralized management. RBAC is so role-based access control is a little easier to enforce in here amongst staff. Say, hey, the janitor doesn't need domain level access to this server, sort of thing, right? And then if you do have that staff turnover, it's easy to decommission licensing in here and prevent that insider threat, sort of thing. I think it's just a more robust, automated approach to password usage. But look, we didn't have SCIM until a few years ago in here, so it's still relatively new, and I think it's going to continue to be further developed. But I do think it's more secure today, and why we see the push from even Apple and Google are pushing towards passwordless across applications.
Even passkeys, we can see quite a slow adoption in passkeys as well. But at the end of the day, at least at this point in time, any organization should be using a decent password manager, randomly generated passwords, long enough and complex enough, and so on. So, and that really ties back to your personal life, not just your professional life, because sometimes they might interlap, and your personal attack surface could be used eventually as a potential avenue to compromise your professional life as well. So definitely a password manager with properly managing passwords, passkeys, whatever the 2FAs and so on, it should be a standard.
Absolutely. Another question for us before we move on from Molly. There must be AI tools that are able to supplement lack of expertise in a business. Tony, what AI tools is Sophos using in here today?
For some reason, with all this beautiful AI, Gen AI, large language models, Sophos decided to invest a lot in our people. And right now we operate probably one of the largest managed detection and response services on the market. We have close to 600 people in this team, and this large team only dedicated to, threat hunting, incident response, threat intelligence, and so on. And I don't want to disregard AI. And yes, to some extent, AI can make understanding of the security in general a lot easier for where there is a bit of lack of expertise. But today, at this point in time, it is not a complete replacement of the human intelligence and human creativity. They can still bypass your AI. They can still bypass. Definitely, AI is embedded in technology, and in our case, it's supposed to respond to really come back to your question, Ted. We use AI in a lot of our products protection-wise. We use AI in our SecOps to accelerate how fast humans can respond. It's part of the XDR toolset as well to accelerate understanding certain indicator of compromise, be completely merged into cases and really prioritize those that we need to look at first. So you can see definitely AI at the different levels of, let's tie it back to the attack kill chain, from protection to security operation. But is effectively, when we look at expertise, that's not as a replacement. It is definitely an acceleration of how quick our teams can respond to threats.
Molly came back and said, but AI would be excellent analyzing logs. And I think so. I've used it in here for log analyzing. I've also used it to define some, security policies that we use. But then I overrule that at times and say, okay, look, AI gave me back a bad answer. It really should be phrased this way. I think it's close, for some of these things like policies and so on. But then you still need that human intervention to step in. It's great for these manual tasks like log analyzing, maybe from a firewall, maybe from endpoint security products. And I think, look, it's probably better that there is some caution around implementing AI into products in here and not just going willy-nilly. Here's a chat GPT embedded in our product, so to speak. So great questions. That just moving on, conscious of time in here. We've got a few more slides to go through. Recovery. Okay, so Tony, how are people recovering? I see 35% here fully recovered in a week or less, 34% more than a month to recover in here. So it's 24% before. Why is it taking?
It ties back to the expertise. It ties back to your preparedness, and it's something I want to bring up towards the end of the session. How ready you are to recover? Do you have a plan in place? Do you have a full incident response plan that really tells you what to do when you get in those stressful times to respond and eventually recover? Because remember, recovering implies also a root cause analysis. Just restoring from backups, it's not equivalent to recover. You're just putting your business back on running, but it does not mean you've eliminated it completely and eliminated the threat. How do you know for sure you remove that threat out of the all the backdoors potentially being created during the compromise? So long story short, so in the interest of time, we can move on. It really ties back to the expertise, and it really ties also back to the level of compliance and what that recovery means. Because if you are a financial company or you are a health managing records company or something in a very highly regulated space, recovering has to be proven with forensics against your cybersecurity insurance. So it typically becomes a different story.
Yeah, and going back to that earlier chart where vulnerabilities are the most severe impact. Look, some of that time to recover in here might be because backups were compromised as well. I hear a lot more today than I used to when I first started working in backup, at least, of products providing immutable backups, meaning they can't be changed at all, and doing one immutable backup per day in here that is ransomware proofed sort of thing, and being able to test that backup. Not every organization has that capability, and there's products today that make it fairly easy within the market, right? But the encryption rate from ransomware is going up, and then people just paying, sort of thing. So hey, Tony, what are Sophos's recommendations? I've got a few here. Prevention, protection, detection and response, planning and prep. Does that mean having a disaster recovery plan for?
You've called it out, I think. You've called it out really nicely some slides ago. You've called it a cybersecurity program. And this is the core capabilities. If you look at the first three, prevention, protection, detection and response. So prevention really starts with really understanding what you have, understanding your attack surface, understanding your potentially vulnerabilities and so on. But then when you look at the really investing in the cybersecurity program, you look at the protection first. You want to make sure protection is good. You're not going to completely rely on advanced technologies to detect and respond. You want to make sure not much goes past your protection into the detection and response, because you want to allow time for those teams and services to really focus on those highly potential, attacks. Planning and preparation. I've mentioned it probably a few times already. An incident response plan, it's very essential, because you never know how stressful those times are until you're actually faced with a potential breach or a live active threat that you have to respond to, and logic goes out the window, and you don't know what to do first. Who are you going to call? What are you going to do? Are you going to what? This is not the 1950s. You're not going to start unplugging cables in desperation of protecting your assets. So definitely having an incident response plan is part of this whole cybersecurity program.
Look, I think that cybersecurity program too has to be designed for small businesses in here, especially within Australia. You know, I joke with people and say, you know, I can blow out a security budget. You know, just hand me over the credit card and I can spend a few $1 million on security tools. And, you know, I can. However, that's not effective for every single business that we speak with in here. You know, and having a more simplified vendor that gives them approaches to different verticals is often necessary, right? And I think this is where Sophos's tools are very powerful, and you can get that single console in here to cover you from endpoint to email to firewalls in here, and just have that one administrator managing it. You don't need that whole team.
You know what's interesting to reinforce this idea? If 3-5 years ago, 10 years ago, you looked at really probably high enterprise organizations looking into getting the best of breed in each category, we can see vendor consolidation and product and service consolidation in large enterprises as well. They understood that consolidation really leads to a lot of benefits, from financial benefits to synergizing that expertise that we've already talked about so many times, and eventually make it buy time and make it a lot easier for your teams to quickly respond to threats. And vendor consolidation, that's the focus for Sophos for ever since we launched Sophos Central. And last year we've celebrated 10 years of existence with Sophos Central, now of course 11, but it's a very cloud-centric approach to cybersecurity where you can be in one place and operate your whole cybersecurity.
Very, very different from the original CyberArk products that I still see from time to time.
That's right? Just a small piece, just a small piece, yeah. And that's all gone. That's all gone. All the whole code is now gone.
So look, going back just to Sophos Central, you know, knowing your requirements, you know, and not paying for what we call shelfware in industry, you know, hey, super important, right? Being able to auto configure and avoiding misconfigurations, also important, and we'll talk on that in just a second. And then automating some of those incident responses, you know, low-level attacks, you know, maybe closing a firewall port if you start detecting a DOS attack and so on. Automatically, that should be kind of a priority for small businesses in here. Now, Tony, you mentioned something earlier, your unified security platform. What is Sophos Central in here? I know that's
okay, so
question.
again, very shortly, Sophos Central is a single pane of glass, a cloud-based console where you can manage all the Sophos products. So it starts with our own products that we provide, and oh gosh, how many we have. You can see in that drop-down menu that we do from, you know, we really focus on different security stacks, from endpoint to cloud to network and email or messaging. But you can see from endpoint to mobile to encryption, we have quite a lot of products: server protection, cloud. Now in the network security space, we have probably more than most people even think of. Wireless access points, firewalls, virtual and physical appliances, ZTNA, switches, network detection and response. So many products. And of course, as we already mentioned a few times today, initial access and email and identity compromise. So definitely we've invested in that, both protection within that attack vector, like think of email and emailing in general, but also training and testing your user awareness with a Sophos Phish threat tool for those who may be not completely aware of that. It's a cybersecurity awareness education tool where you can effectively simulate various type of phishing attacks against your own users. And again, it's not because you want to, push them in a corner and point fingers at them. You want to make sure they become more aware and more alert and understand how they can be part of the cybersecurity culture.
User buy-in is super important in here. What I find with phishing programs, you've got to have user buy-in. And that's one of the hardest bits. Is you might have somebody who just loves clicking emails and fails every phishing test. And yes, you don't want that to happen in real life, where it's not a phishing test and they're clicking emails. But something needs to happen.
Now, just before we look into this slide, by the way, that Sophos Central also is an open platform. So we do allow you to bring on telemetry from third parties as well. It's not restricted to our own products. When it comes to respond to running your cybersecurity program, you want to have all that in one place. So with Sophos Central, you can bring your third-party security telemetry from different firewalls, networks, email security. So I'm not going to call out any vendors right now, but think of all the top vendors on the market in different categories or security stacks. You can bring that telemetry, and it's not just the log retention, or because we don't really do it. We're not a SIEM. That's actually a data lake, which is just a fancy name for a central repository that once telemetry ends up in, we run a lot of detection logic on top of that to really correlate and contextualize that data into a better story for you, an actionable insight that allows you to quickly respond and be aware not of what Sophos products generated, but also what other security products did. And of course, very quickly on the Sophos Central account health check, I think we've mentioned today, it's important to know when you start deploying from the single pane of glass console, the products, if you misconfigured anything, if there is anything you have to address, and of course, if you look at this screenshot, you see the account health check is scoring is 71. So definitely are things that you might need to look into. I'm not going to get into the weeds what this means, but effectively it points out to various areas of Sophos Central, from configuration to different type of exclusions or risky exclusions, and how a quick way for you to address them and fix the problem before actually it becomes a risk.
I think the nice thing with this and the next service we're going to talk about from you guys, Tony, is it goes back to that lack of expertise in here from SMBs, where you need that extra advisory hand. And yes, myself here at Virtual Graffiti, I'm always here to do that from a virtual CISO or virtual CIO perspective. However, you can also get that validated by an additional third party, right? And that validation is very, very important in here. Just quickly, the Sophos Central Advisory Services. Sophos also have their own advisory that can align you to either NIST or NIST2 requirements. NIST and NIST2 are regulatory compliance that Five Eyes organizations put out here to align the cybersecurity strategies of an organization. So, for example, using physical tokens in these cases, and Sophos can align their product suites to those government advisory panels. The health check report tells you how your devices are doing, as well as any other trusted advisory that you need from a vendor.
The good news, we just launched a new one today, part of that. So if you're going to go into your central account and click on that university ad, you're going to see the new add-on, which is the CIS controls version 8.1, also been added to as an assessment, coming back to Five Eyes and Nine Eyes and so on. And last but not least on this one, please have a look at that incident response plan generator, because honestly, that's gold for free. You're going to be amazed by the complexity and comprehensiveness of this response plan that generates, and you can just edit to your liking and to your needs, and effectively have something in place that tells you
First step,
when
second
things go
step.
wrong,
Yeah.
what do you do? What are you gonna do? What's the flow? Who are you gonna call, and what are you gonna do?
Just to go into summary in here before we wrap it up, you know, the key challenge everyone has is skill shortage, right? This isn't going anywhere. It's always going to be an issue. We're going to have this issue for a long time to come. The impact, you know, hey, small businesses are going to be hit harder by this than the large banks will be. You know, the large banks have whole SOC teams and NOC teams that handle these sorts of things. What you can do about it now, though, is you can partner with the specialists, whether at Virtual Graffiti or from Sophos or a combination of both. We are here to help you. You know, we offer free workshops, free pre-sales, free post-sales advice in some cases to help you along your cyber security journey and in maturing your cybersecurity programs within your organization. So, you know, feel free to reach out to myself, Tony, anyone else from our teams, and we would love to help you. And lastly, Tony, I think that brings us to our last slide here. We got to thank everyone for joining.
Thanks. Hopefully you enjoyed the session, and definitely cybersecurity is a game that you have to be involved in. It's not a spectator game. You have to be part of that game and get involved. And as Ted mentioned, you are in good hands. You have a lot of expertise with Virtual Graffiti. Remember that Sophos is a fully channel-focused vendor. We support our partners. We ride behind them, working with them alongside you and trying to resolve any type of challenge that you have. So you know which avenues to approach when it comes to reaching out. And I'll hand it back to you guys to close up.
Awesome. Yeah, look, guys, we would love to help in here. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. I want to thank everyone for spending the hour with us as it is. I know your time is very valuable. Feel free to reach out to our team to say hello. We'd love to do some free security workshops with each and every one of you. So, you know, expect a phone call from my team here in the next couple of days. Okie dokie. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Tony, thank you for your time, Aman as well, and Jenny for setting up this webinar. We really appreciate it. Ciao for now.